right, well, welcome everybody. It's wonderful to see everyone coming in and attending today's RPA workshop. We are super excited to have everyone join us today. And before we get started, I'd just like to remind everybody that all attendees have been muted. Today's presentation will, of course, be recorded, and we really encourage our audience to get involved in today's workshop by including any kind of questions that may come up in the Zoom Q&A tool. So at this point, I'd now like to introduce today's workshop host, Ram Sathya, PK's Vice President of Intelligent Automation. Ram?
Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining our webinar. Today we have Ajmer, transformation architect from my team. We have Ivan and Azar, who are transformation specialists. We are going to talk about the importance of RPA COE. Let's look at the agenda real quick. As you all know, RPA is gaining significant traction in the whole transformation journey, and we have seen a lot of pitfalls and failures, and we want to talk about some of the lessons we have learned, how we have handled the whole RPA Center of Excellence, and more importantly, talk about why it is extremely important for organizations to think about having a foundation element, which is the COE today. Just a quick introduction about PK. For those who are not familiar, we are an experience engineering firm headquartered in Beaverton, Oregon. We have global development centers. We work across various digital capabilities across several industries. Quickly talk about a very recent recognition by Forrester. We have been recognized as one of the strong performer in the RPA mid-size services wave. A copy of the report is available in pkglobal.com. Gives a lot of insights into the where RPA is heading and how the mid-services players play a very key role in the whole RPA arena. Just to highlight, specific to PK, certainly we have been positioned as an emerging niche vendor. Specific highlights around our innovation, our solution mindset, the IP, the whole product roadmap for our own IP, all of that, pivots into what is our vision towards the whole long-term intelligent automation journey. With that, I'm going to transition to Ajmer to talk about some of the challenges in the whole RPA initiatives. Ajmer.
Thank you, Ram. Thank you, Ram. I'm Ajmer, Intelligent Automation Solution Head. Just post questions in a Q&A so that we can make the sessions more interactive. Let's start with some of the RPA challenges that every organization faces. The challenges are start with the resistance to the automation, and too often the opportunity that gets automated are not necessarily the best ones. Some of the organizations, they feel that either they are too difficult to implement or they don't yield the material benefits. So what happens? The net results, they don't add up to the expectation. With automation, it comes with a lot of governance, experience, a lot of documentations, operating procedures, solution design. So you need a lot of collaboration from IT team to the business team to manage the repo, automation pipeline, ROI, right? So some of the initiative, it fails because the process assessment is not a data-driven approach and ended with selecting a poor candidate, especially when they want to automate very quickly. Having said that, I'd like to ask our Head of Automation, Ram Sathya, about Ram, what do you think, what PK approach is on solving common RPA challenge, especially on the process assessment side?
Based on our experience, what we have seen is that the foundation elements that are very key for any RPA initiative is having the solid COE platform. Whether you are a large enterprise or RPA initiative within a small business function, part of a larger initiative, having a consistent methodology of how you identify your candidate processes for automation, how you identify, your expected benefits. How do you put the whole plan in place so that it can be focused around the time to value, and especially initiatives like this where you make an upfront investment, hoping that there'll be a return. The most important aspect is how quickly you can achieve those returns, right? So time to value plays a very key role, right? And there are a lot of pieces in the puzzle when it comes to automation. You have humans, you have tools, you have technologies, you have customers, right? So it is very important to have a very thorough methodology in place in order to identify the right candidate, invest on the right automation opportunities, and be successful in the whole RPA initiative.
Absolutely. Thank you, Ram. So why Center of Excellence is important for RPA initiatives? To us, a Center of Excellence is heart of any RPA program. Start from the process ideations to the operationalization of the part. Each automation idea as an automation profile with the purpose of making all relevant information and documentation available in a single report. As the automation advances through the life cycle, the automation profile needs enriched, updated with the feasibility, complexity, and ROI projections as a single source of truth. You need to have a framework to assess the feasibility and complexity, and you have to do the cost-benefit analysis to know the ROI measurement of your investment. You still need the right framework to score, rank, and prioritize the opportunities. And you need to have a real-time tracing of your metrics like bot metrics, business metrics, ROI metrics to measure the success of your RPA program. These typically achieved only with the help of COE. I see some questions in the Q&A. Ram, do you want to take it up? Ram, how long would it take to set up Center of Excellence?
Well, we have seen, from our experience, for large enterprise, anywhere between 8 to 12 weeks, which includes identifying the right platform, onboarding your teams, setting up the right processes, tools, templates, model, which is another important aspect, right? What is the operating model, right? Especially the way how enterprise operate, right? IT owned, federated, or it could be hybrid model as well, right? So there's a whole bunch of aspects, but we have seen that at PK, one of the way how we have enabled to accelerate the whole journey is bringing in the whole COE in a box, which we're going to talk about. The COE in a box can significantly reduce the time that you take to set up your entire COE, right? Instead of going from 6 to 8 weeks or 8 to 12 weeks to set up the COE in a box, our methodology and our IP is helping us to set up the COE in a box, or the whole COE, in a matter of few days. And we'll talk about that in detail.
Thank you, Ram. Thank you, Ram. Azhar, can you walk us through the steps involved in the process assessment, starting from the process ideation to the ROI measurement? Over to you, Azhar.
Absolutely. Thank you, Ajmer. Hey, hello. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. I'm Azhar Khan, RPA Transformation Specialist here at PK. I'll be discussing on how important process assessment is for the success of RPA program, and to have a data-driven approach to build the automation roadmap, right? It's easy to build automations, but building a good automation requires methodology for the consistency and effectiveness, right? The mission of RPA SUA is to embed RPA within the workflows across the company, right? Be the one-stop RPA expert for people who want to seeking to understand RPA, who want to deploy or monitor RPA. First question we get in most people is, how do we start this journey, right? Where do we start? So a good start, I would say, for organizations is to start with the journey mapping, right? You performing a deep assessment of business function activities at the task level, go deeper and wide within the business organization to understand the process landscape. And, you would, by that step, you will understand, what skills you required, what automation technologies are needed apart from RPA. So by analyzing those, you have the assessment and you will reveal the top automation candidates, which will have the great impact to the business. So one of the, and these tasks are not easy, right? You have to spend a lot of time. One of the most time consuming activities in automation projects are process assessments and process discovery. So for identification and also the selecting the right candidate for automation. To accelerate these steps, we have a methodology and, we should have a framework to drive this enterprise RPA adoption to scale and growth and to easily be, scale across our, geographies as well as any other business functions. Most importantly, we should have a data-driven approach that helps managers and business leaders to visualize centrally and manage their RPA program data. So companies' leadership have the view of what processes are there in our pipeline and make the strategic decisions on what will have the greatest impact, right? We use, and then once we have this, we have all the journey mapping data, we need to have a processpedia, a process catalog reference where we can go and see what business processes are there within our business function. And that would be a good start for your automation journey. And then we need to have a designed centralized submission of opportunities to drive the employees driven opportunity submission. Now we need to bridge the gap between the top down and the bottom up approach to, employees are one of the good resources to get the best ideas for automation. So a centralized hub to gather those ideas, and we should have that information available readily to assess quickly. So one of the major capabilities the team should carry within the RPA is to know how quickly we can assess that process, right? Having that quick assessment of feasibility and complexity to determine what is the automation readiness of this process and what is the feasibility and what development effort it requires to build this automation. This requires a thorough assessment, and having those capabilities within the team to quickly assess will definitely reduce the time for us to move to the later stages in the life cycle. So we have the processes, we have determined the feasibility, we have determined the complexity. Now we need to quantify the return on investment. This is one of the key steps, right? You have the business processes now, and we need to quantify the business to make a decision on what automation needs to prioritize for the development. To build this solid automation business case, you need to use the results from the process discovery and the assessment activities. Have a dashboard that tracks that real-time activity on your process discovery and assessment activities. And then we need to define a automation criteria that will use against that information which we have gathered in the process discovery and assessment, and then drive that detailed work analytics for the process discovery statistics, where you can have a clear picture on prioritized automation list and what are the projections on ROI to make decisions on how these are the automation candidates we need to prioritize for the first phases of our RPA. Right. Now we have built automation roadmap. We have prioritized our automation roadmap for development. Now while we have built the automation for this prioritized list, we need to justify our ROI, right? We need to justify the ROI to the business, show them the visibility on how the automations are doing. So for this, the lack of awareness on or lack of insight on what RPA deployments are doing, cause, negatively impact the RPA journeys. So the business who are seeking the proof of RPA, they need to have the capabilities to centrally manage, measure, and report those RPA operations with our strategic business outcomes to provide that quantitative metrics to overall organization to build that trust with the business functions or the leadership that RPA is doing great and we are moving in a right direction for our automation maturity. So having those capabilities, organizations are empowered. They can confidently invest in RPA to enable RPA for the evolution of their transformations and make strategy towards how they are moving in the right direction. Having that detailed program insights, reporting on real-time execution metrics, detailed workforce on their success and failures of automation activities, to validate against the business case, comparing against the executions will definitely help a business to understand how we are doing. So the methodology we discussed, provides a transformative capabilities for automation-focused organization. It provides a framework to drive transformation, boost agility, and time to market to build enterprise automation consistently. Thank you. So we have this processpedia. Ram, what use cases you would recommend on different verticals for automation opportunities?
Thanks, Azar. Based on our experience, we have evaluated several industries, several business units, and we have created what we call as the Wikipedia for bots, right? And we have identified some 800 some processes across industries and across verticals. Our recommendation is always start with what is core to your business. What are some of your core customer problems and business problems? Obviously your cost reduction, error reduction, those are all some of the key priorities. But if it doesn't make sense for your street story or for your books, don't automate, right? For example, let's say if you look at one of the very key metric that we use that businesses use for reporting their performance is the day sales outstanding, right? Financial metric, right? Very less focus from a digital transformation standpoint, very less focus on that from IT standpoint. It's traditional finance way of doing stuff, right? The IT and the tech and innovation is all focused on solving customer problems, but you have a very key process, right? Which is a combination of your accounts receivable and accounts payable, accounts receivable contributing to your day sales outstanding, right? And as you all know that, a day or two reduction in your day sales outstanding means your cash flow is higher, your credit rating goes up, your market capitalization goes up, you have a better street story, you have more, capital available to spend and grow, right? And that is where we would target, right? And underneath, if you look at the whole day sales outstanding, you have accounts payable, you have several channels, you have several ways of, invoices coming in, irony is that we have heard some customers, right? The process is very legacy, not because of them, but because of their channels and their vendors, that they still get invoices mailed as envelope. They open the envelope, they key in the data in their financial system, they seal it and they send it back, right? Imagine that this is not the one-stop business process that the whole digitization is trying to transform, right? We are still dealing with a lot of paper, of course, lack of trust, lack of adoption, lack of trust on the technology itself, right? Played a very key role in the last several years. Why transformation has not happened in some of those business processes, but now we are at a explosion of AI, machine learning, robotic technologies, and all of that, right? The technology evolved so fast that you can completely automate the whole digitization. In this case, an accounts payable or invoice processing, accounts receivable, right? So our recommendation always look at your own business problem and street stories. And the second important metric I want to share is, if you take supply chain as an example, of course, supply chain plays a very key role for any product that are served, right? Whether you're manufacturing or a telecom, of course, retail, very big, right? The key metric is the days in inventory or the days of inventory on hand. Imagine a day or two of reduction of days in inventory, what that could mean for your business. Huge, right? And underneath that, if you look at the processes, Yes, you have the an Amazon fulfillments of the world, that has this decentralized distribution and all of that, but still, the underlying processes, everything from procure to pay, your cash to cash processes, your order generation processes, and your whole warehouse management and distributions and operations, right? Several of those are still manual, and especially we are still dealing with scanning. Of course, we have gone from scanning barcode to a QR code through mobile app and all that, but you're still scanning, right? Still paper-based process, right? And that's where I think investing significantly on some of those areas would be a very high value, right? Now, how did we come to know? Based on our experience, based on how we have implemented some of our processes and methodology, and that's what the whole 800 set of processes that we have identified, right? Whether it is HR, healthcare, payer organization, provider organizations, right? Across industries, across business units, we have identified several of those. That actually acts as a foundation, right, for anybody to go and pick up, question the status quo, right? I think that is the most important thing we recommend, right? Problem, right? The solving the problem actually starts from your operations, right? The people that are building those processes, the people that are operating the process, they are not able to scale. There are lack of tacit knowledge, right? Retention, skill availability, right? It's very difficult to onboard somebody and train them and start operating on the process manually, right? And that's where your motivation should start at your employees, and tell them that, hey, identify some automation that can make sense for our business, that will create an impact on our street story, on our financial report. With that, let's do a very short demo of the whole journey of what we call as expedition planning. Starts with identifying your process candidate, and how do you identify what is the right process to automate. Over to Ivan.
Thank you, Ram. Hello, everybody, and welcome. With all said in mind, let's go ahead and take a quick preview into our expedition planner inside our automation Basecamp to start our journey. When it comes to identifying the best candidates for automation, we must ask the right questions to aim for those processes that will maximize the company's productivity and also have the best return of investment. This is where the journey map comes into effect. Our methodology's main goal is to ease implementation and process discovery for RPA into a company by analyzing the process to a deeper level to understand its real value. Process starts with submitting the basic information, which is required to understand at a high level, including, let's say, the departments within our organization or the physical locations where these processes are being performed, allowing us to be the possibility to scale into other regions or other parts of the company. We also consider dividing the process into sub-processes by application. A quick example would be, let's take our supplier invoice processing, where the application we're using is actually ASAP. So the sub-process is the same for the whole company. However, we have the steps that come after, varying between regions and offices. We can easily scale the ASAP steps and automate them up to 80% of the process. However, the remaining of the process would have too many variations or would require human decisions per agent judgment. If we talk about key metrics, we would have to take a look into the volume, the number of transactions over a period of time, what are the hours that are involved performing such tasks, and what is the hourly wage for those performing said tasks. Of course, we have to keep in mind how many FTEs are actually active during these activities. And if you understand all these key metrics, these are the main factors driving your ROI calculations. We will also ask ourselves, how frequent are we really doing these tasks? How many times a day? What are the slave for each transaction? Also, of course, keeping in mind always what will be the lead time against our cycle time. When we talk about the process and mining through our existing candidates, we have to keep in mind what will be the input. We're talking about an Excel or perhaps an email. However, what is the formatting of said document? the best automation candidates will always have a structured or semi-structured input, such as Excel or a PDF with tables, perhaps even a supplier invoice with semi-structured data that is not common to change or does not have frequent updates. Once you have that understanding, we can move into the output of our processes. What are we really expecting our processes to have as an output? Are we focusing on to having the output of a report with our account numbers, client names, and the spend report all consolidated into one Excel, or perhaps just sending an email out with all the information that was previously processed? Once on the list is possible, the candidates, or once we have listed all our possible candidates, we move on to our process catalog, and we continue to review the following steps, which would actually be our feasibility and our complexity. So these are very, very important key metrics that we have to look into and consider to have the possible or the correct candidates to be automated ourselves. Let's give it 1 second here. When we actually have our full list complete of all our possible, let's say Wikipedia of possible candidates, you have to have them visually available for you all the time. When we talk about complexity, it's very important. We have to keep those two key points in mind: feasibility and complexity. While we're going to be focusing on complexity itself only, when this goes beyond how many steps does the process really have, because we must consider if the process that we are going to automate is really rule-based. What we mean by rule-based is there is no room for judgment calls, or that must be to a bare minimum. Those judgment calls, we will consider them as exceptions that will be sent to a human to finish those specific transactions. If the data format or process steps are rigid or structured, we can definitely spend more time upfront preparing the structured data or tweaking our process rules to fit the category. If the data is structured, if the data is actually structured, the complexity is actually lower, and we can retrieve the information with much ease when we talk about compared to when we talk about unstructured data, such as an open email reply that can have infinity of variations, making the process complexity very high. That will actually fall lower into our priority list unless we consider and adapt some optimization by replacing the open worded reply with semi-structured tools such as the quick steps that's already integrated into our Outlook, or perhaps switching the focus of the email reply to an Excel attachment, or even change the subject line that can be standardized to contain keywords. So once we have all the complexity filled and understand what we're talking about, we can move into the feasibility section. When we talk about feasibility, we must talk about the actual process, environments, and even consider if the SME availability. If we have identified the process has low complexity, high volumes, it appears to be a possible candidate. However, it turns out this process has a third-party application that could be constantly down or constantly changing its UI. You may ask yourself, how does this really affect negatively our process if it seems to stay the same? Only a couple buttons change. This will actually affect your ROI, since the process will have a high maintenance cost. Every time the application has a change, the bot has a possibility of breaking and therefore needs to be updated, meaning that we will need to pay a developer to update the code constantly while our SMEs are processing all the data that were previously automated manually, until again, the bot is ready for operations. It is also important to remember that this development time includes the testing and the user approval phases. Other instabilities of the process perhaps can come from the input itself. We covered what structured data and semi-structured data is. However, we must keep in mind that the actual input can change constantly, and that will affect our reliability on the bot. Now, the mentioned scenarios are only a couple that we have seen throughout our experience, but it's worth pointing out to you to have a better understanding of what stability really is when it comes to a process. It may not change the process itself, but we are completing the same steps, correct? We are still opening email, still downloading the PDF, extracting the information from that PDF, but the information we're extracting actually changes its place. Now, Once we have filled out the feasibility and our complexity reports, we jump into our digital work analytics. The digital work analytics is a visual representation of all the data collected and from all the processes, with its main purpose to help view and score the rankings. We can easily see the top ROI processes and also know our low-hanging fruits, which would have that rule of 20% investment and 80% ROI, which are definitely the ones that we are aiming for. If we take a look at the top left corner of our quadrant here, we can see the opportunities meaning those are the processes that we can need slight adjustments or process optimization to increase the potential ROI. On the bottom right, we can also focus on the ones that have a good candidate but require less effort in changes. However, its volume, it's not ideal. Now, if we change our focus to the top left, the top right, we'll have our low-hanging fruits, like I said, but our bottom left, it's the complete opposite of our top candidates. Those are the ones that we want to avoid in the process of our automation. So here we can visually have all the process lists, what would be our possible ROI projections, as well as our top 10 savings, or what process will be consistent of our top savings. Now that we have talked about all this, the quadrants, the possibility of which ones would be the best ROI, visual representation of all the information gathered, and our Wikipedia list, let's go ahead and jump into the benefits of this tool itself. So managing the pipeline, this will help scale and manage all of your pipeline. This will also help ease the process of process discovery and help you bring a greater potential or impact to help your decision making, as well as map out what processes have the best opportunities in your pipeline. And the trap program data, when we talk about this, it's not only about how much you've invested, but it has to show the value of how much the ROI, the time savings, the metrics improvement from a business point, and also the error reduction. With all this data, is easily shareable, and you will see the benefit of the positive impact on your customer satisfaction. With all this information available to you right now, we can jump into the Q&A section.
Thank you, Ivan. Really appreciate you sharing this demo and these insights. And yeah, we have had a few questions come through from today's audience. So we do have an attendee who is wondering, what are the top 3 RPA software in the market today?
A great question. Let's answer this in 2 ways, right? One is market capitalization, right? If you look at it purely from market cap, the top 3 vendors are UiPath, Automation Anywhere, and Blue Prism. But if you look at from a product roadmap, alignment with the larger enterprise stack, and how well the platform can connect with your internal systems, right? So some of these are very untold story, and that's what we want to share, right? If you look at UiPath, if you look at Power Automate or a Power Platform and Workato, I think those 3 are very significant. Especially if you take Power Platform, right, it has got a seamless integration into all your Microsoft Office 365 and whatnot. UiPath has got several plugins that they have built for AI, machine learning based digitization and whatnot, right? And then if you look at Workato, which is traditionally was an iPaaS, but now moving towards automation, right? Now it's a very automation at a bot based approach, has got several connectors that you can easily automate, right? And in that order, if you look at, right, the citizen developer empowerment, which is commoditization of the bot, anybody can build a bot. I think in that order, right, Workato would be the first, second would be Power Automate, and the third would be UiPath.
Thank you, Ram. And going off of that, we have someone wondering, how is this different from Automation Hub or UiPath?
That's a great question. What we showed you is methodology. Of course, it's a innovation or IP that we created completely using Power Platform, Power App, not necessarily used only for your Power Automate initiative, but can be used for anything. But the biggest difference between UiPath and our methodology is, one is UiPath, certainly, very well-known platform, right? The Automation Hub, which is in part of the UiPath, comes as part of the standard licensing, which is in the range of $10,000 per year for usage. Every year you have to pay for the licenses and whatnot, whereas our platform is one-time setup and one-time cost. We can, if you're more interested, we can talk about offline what the cost looks like and whatnot. But more importantly, I think the approach, right, the way how our platform is looking at it is, it's the bottom up. Not just looking at a task per se, but from a business process per se, right? If you look at Automation Hub, right, it is the foundation is the task mining. Let's mine the task. Let's set up the agent-based access, and then start identifying what is the right process and how that goes to the whole life cycle. Versus ours is the COI in a box that we are recommending is purely from a business process, where the origination, that matters. The origination comes from the employees and the citizen operators, right? That's where the origination is. And because it originates from the bottom up, all the tacit knowledge, all the sticky notes, and all this complex process that are not documented, right, are part of the whole journey map.
Great. And Ram, we have an attendee looking for any kind of thoughts or advice you might have on how to implement RPA within government entities. Can you elaborate on that?
Absolutely. From a very regulatory industries, like for example government processes, our recommendation and our experience is around what is your ideal COE model, right? That is very important. Would you have a centralized model? You have a decentralized model, because especially in a DoD type of setup, you have different types of business units catering to different types of capabilities. Their funding process different, right? There's whole gamut of the way how those individual organizations operate, right? And we have also seen that if you take some of the examples of how the government processes, for example, the accounting organization across the nation, right? There are the tax authorities have created their own COEs, automated a whole bunch of processes. There are several other business units where they have built procurement processes, all of that, right? They have built their own federated models, right? So from a process standpoint, right, it could be federated model. In some cases it would be hybrid model and whatnot. But because every business unit is very unique in nature, right, and the funding is very unique, and then you have a whole bunch of regulatory aspects, right? What informations are shared, how the bots can operate, the security plays a very, very key role. Especially you're moving from a high complaint to confidential environment and whatnot, and that's where you want to look at what Forrester's recommendation as the zero trust security, which is idea aware, integration with your security information management system, and driving the data through analytics and completely insights-driven automation, right? So those are some of the best practices that you might want to be very aware when you're looking at automation from a regulated industry standpoint.
Great, thank you. And we have an attendee who's wondering, how long does a typical RPA assessment take, and what does the customer need to bring to the assessment?
From an assessment standpoint, we have seen the most successful assessment is what we call as the day in the life of. The more our specialist or any process specialist, functional specialist are attached to the business operations or the business user to understand what that day in the life looks like, right? I think that actually gives a very significant information, right? But practically it's not possible, especially with COVID and all of that, right? So the inputs that we've asked for is that your lead time, your cycle time, and in some cases, right, a business process might be operated by several people, right? Some might have an hour of work, but it takes about 8 hours for them to complete that, right? Just the cycle time alone, it's 8 hours, but they might spend only an hour, right? So that lead time, the cycle time, right? Making sure that every aspect of that process is included, right? Then the most important is the structure, right? Data structure, right? Are you going to deal with the structured data, unstructured data? Do you have rules defined? Are there on the fly rules? Goodwill? How do you automate goodwill? So there are some challenges that we'll have to be very cognizant of, right? How do you convert that into a complete rule-based approach? In some cases, we have seen that the process itself would require some changes. The way how traditionally has been operating, you want to automate, you want to make some slight changes, but that's the whole purpose, right? If the traditional way of operating on a business process, if that has to be optimized for quality, for error reduction, for cost, you might have to change some process. And I think that is a common sense, but there is always that fear of, oh, I don't want to change the process because I might be impacting my vendors, my employees, my customers, right? And that's where I think looking at automation as how we can transform the way how we have been operating. I think that is very important aspect, right? How you look at the actual approach, not just look at, okay, I'm going to replace a whole bunch of manual tasks with a bot, but rather what can I do to make this business process better, lean, mean, cost effective, and high quality.
That's great. Thank you, Ram. We have an attendee who recognizes that cloud-based solutions, SaaS, keep changing constantly. How can we estimate the cost benefit of the automation given this constant change on the cloud solutions?
Ajmer, do you want to answer that?
Yeah, sure. So when it comes to the ROI cost benefit, there are multiple things you need to consider, right? It is infrastructure cost, it is a licensing cost, it's an implementation cost, and then the benefit that you are going to get. So I believe that you're referring, it is not only that the cloud SaaS solution, you're talking about the infra. If that is the questions, that there are tools which are actually is like a pay-as-you-go, like Workato. Those are like a constant pricing. It won't change based on the cloud solutions. When it comes to the licensing cost, again, it is all like some of the RPA tools. It definitely like it's use or lose, but some of the RPA tools is like a pay-as-you-go. So it depends on what kind of RPA tool you choose to actually avoid the variances when especially looking for the cloud-based solutions. Thank you, Ram.
Yeah, and just to add to that, I think your automation design and your automation approach also has to be thought through very well, right? Especially if you have SaaS platforms, you do not control the changes, but you have a contract. You have a contract, and several of the SaaS platforms exposes the contracts in the form of API. Those APIs are very well defined and they are fairly stable, right? Even if there are changes introduced in those contracts, your existing specifications and your existing contracts would not break. So if you have a very constantly changing UI application, instead of looking at a UI perspective, right? We want to look at from a API perspective, right? And that's where what we call as the API and the automation meets, right? One of the perception is that is RPA the right direction or the API is the right direction? But our belief is that you have to look at it from both, a combined journey, right? The screen scraping, the UI crawling, and all of that are great for for environments where you do not have any other option. You do not have API. The API, they're not exposing the API, right? Otherwise, wherever you have API, we always recommend to use that API as a route. And in this case, if you have SaaS platforms, especially if the SaaS platforms have connectors to your RPA platform, great. Those connectors are built based on the meta model and the metadata, easy to automate. If the API is exposing as, if the SaaS platform is exposing as API, even better, right? Standard API-based interface using all these RPA platforms provide, and also out of the box, UIPath platforms also provide a lot of API integration, right? So use that, and then the last route would be your UI, right? If there's no other choice, where the UI is. That way, I think you can reduce, you can put a very thorough cost-benefit analysis, in that whole ecosystem.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much to Ram and our automation team for sharing these insights and answering these questions from today's audience. So please be sure to check your inbox for today's recording and a recap, as well as a complimentary link to Forrester's recent RPA wave. And we really appreciate you all for attending today's workshop and look forward to staying in touch with you throughout your RPA journey, and hope to see you in one of our future events. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Have a
Thank
good
you.
rest of the day.
Good day.